kind of a secondary thing. You heard thankfully, old stories from the old hands at the mill about how things used to happen there and people getting seriously hurt, which thankfully I've never really experienced. But nowadays, we're gone to where we're doing toolbox safety talks 3 times a week with all our employees, just reminding them of safety nonstop, doing safety inspections and observations weekly at the mill. Same thing with biosecurity.
Welcome to the Feed Science Podcast. On behalf of Wisenetics, I'm Adam Farnholz, coming from the Animal Food Manufacturing Program at North Carolina State University. Thank you all for joining us today. Our guest that is on the podcast today is Joshua Rengstorf. Joshua is a mill manager, although as you're going to hear, that's probably not exactly the most fair way to describe his job, as he's actually overseeing multiple facilities across multiple states. Joshua, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So if you wouldn't mind, give the audience a bit of your background and how you came to be doing what you're doing today, and then also what it is, in fact, that your job responsibilities are now.
Okay, a little bit of history. I grew up on a farm in north central Kansas around agriculture. Uh, got into feed milling just a little bit by accident almost. I went to tour Kansas State University uh, after high school and went and toured the grain science department there, met with Professor Fairchild, and kind of learned a little bit about it and sounded interesting to me and something I wanted to study. So got into that. After college, went to work for a broiler company in Arkansas as a feed mill supervisor. Moved up through the years for them to be a assistant manager, then feed mill manager, and eventually director of milling over both their feed mills. About 5 years back, I moved to a layer company who I'm currently employed by, and I oversee their 4 feed mills in 3 different states. And I also work with ingredient purchasing that as well. We're actually have operations in 4 states now. We just acquired another operation. So we're also working with 3 toll mills that I'm buying feed ingredients for, or buying feed from, and pricing some feed ingredients with them as well.
Gotcha. So lots of different experiences, kind of going through the process. You also for the K-Stater crowd, of course, of which I am one of the few that decided to actually go into the integrated animal food route. So many of all of the folks that went through the program, including a lot of my friends and stuff going through, everybody ends up in the commercial industry somewhere, right?
Seems that way, yeah. I interviewed with some commercials as well, but
Makes for a little bit of a different world, which I guess kind of leads into the first questions of, in your time, having gone from, when you started and working for that broiler company and getting into the layer, like what have you seen? What have been the most interesting evolutions to you of what's gone on in the feed industry over the last, let's call it 20 years or so?
I think really increased emphasis on things like safety and biosecurity. I mean, especially in the layer industry right now, biosecurity is something we talk about every day, and are looking at every day. It's such a key part of our business model. Safety as well. When I first got in the business, safety was something, the safety director would come out and talk to us maybe once a month about things,
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a secondary thing. You heard thankfully old stories from the old hands at the mill about how things used to happen there and people getting seriously hurt, which thankfully I've never really experienced. But nowadays, we're gone to where we're doing toolbox safety talks 3 times a week with all our employees, just reminding them of safety nonstop, doing safety inspections and observations weekly at the mill. Same thing with biosecurity now. We're doing biosecurity talks every week with our employees, several times a week, just talking about procedures, making sure we're watching everything we're doing, just because it's such a huge cost to our industry if we get exposed to avian influenza. Those are the biggest changes I've seen, I believe, over the years.
Yeah, it's kind of gotten to the point, and I hesitate when we have this conversation to say, that the making of feed has become the easy part of the job of managing it, because it's still not easy, but it's the most. It's certainly become like the most consistent, maybe the most kind of predictable part is, yeah, every week we're going to make feed, and more or less we know what feed we're going to make, and we can kind of plan that around. It's all the other stuff that, as you get higher and higher up in the management chain, and as things have evolved over the years, where it's like, oh yeah, no, if the job was just about getting ingredients in the door and feed out the door, that'd be pretty simple. Because I would imagine that if we, tried to look at your, your day to day job and what you're doing, you're probably spending a pretty significant amount of time on all those things you just talked about, versus just, a question that is a quote feed question, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've had just this morning thinking about on the biosecurity side, I had a report from one of our mills in a different state that someone didn't like some procedures some of my guys were following. So I had to get in touch with those employees and go over that. That was just this morning. Just got an email, one of the first things. Had some other questions on biosecurity stuff has come up by email too, just, this morning already. And, I've dealt with normal stuff too. I've had my first on my way into work this morning, got a text from one of our soybean meal suppliers that the plant was down.
Hmm.
Just things like that, normal day to day. But
Yep.
yeah, of like the things I've had to kind of deal with and fix today, it's been one logistics like that, and a couple things I've had to deal with biosecurity wise. So those have taken up, yeah, like you said, a lot more of my time frame.
I think it's interesting too, in various different places, whether it be surveys that we're doing, or people that we're bringing in and talking to classes of students, or going out and being at some of the national meetings. And it seems like maybe, go back, let's call it a decade, and certainly before that, if I asked most people that were in charge of mills, if I ask you to list what you like about your job and what you don't like about your job, like regulations and dealing with regulations and all that kind of stuff, it used to always be the number one thing up on top. And it's funny, while it certainly hasn't decreased, in fact there's more of it, I hear that a lot less. That's something that people say, that amount of work that because I think everybody's just more or less gotten pretty used to it over the last 10 years of, yeah, it's going to be a part of this job. It's going to be dealing with this regulatory side of things, this procedural side of things, the operational side of things, more than just getting to make feed and make equipment run and work with the employees and things like that.
Definitely. I'd say it's still not one of my favorite parts of my job. I like getting out into the mill and doing stuff yet, but it seems like that's fewer and farther between. I spend way too much time at my desk anymore, answering emails and, like you said, going through paperwork, going through feed records, looking at uh, nutrition results, things like that, instead of actually getting out, walking around, checking on equipment, looking at feed samples, the physical side of it. I enjoy that more than sitting at my desk, but
Yeah.
it seems like the desk is taking over more than 70, 80% of my time anymore.
Yeah, understand, more than I wish I did. So one of the things we talked about just a little bit offline, as we were getting set up for the recording here, is one thing that you have an interest in, that I very certainly also share your interest in, is trying to figure out how to get more people interested into our industry. So if you were talking to somebody and we talk about all these different things that you have to do, but they were to say, okay, but you've done it for a long time, you must clearly really like what you do. What is it that you like about what you do? Why would it be something that you would recommend to others, of this is a good industry to come work with and work in, and here's why?
Well, first off, there's a lot of opportunities. I talked about trying to get people interested. Trying to find people who have been around mills is almost impossible. It's a great industry as far as opportunities. I get emails probably through LinkedIn weekly, someone looking to fill a position, wondering if
Hmm.
I'm interested. There's plenty of opportunities. So you find it, company you want to work for and job you like, and it's easy to stay. That's number one. A lot of opportunities, but also the job itself. It's so varied. You don't get bored. I couldn't, like I was talking about, I couldn't just go into work and sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. I gotta get up, go walk around the mill, check things out, look at equipment, look and see what's going on, listen to things, get to move around, and that's the exciting part to me. Is just every day is different. I was thinking about you know the other this my week this week. One day I was up at a facility a couple states away from here, and I was climbing about 85 feet up to the top of the mill to increase bearings.
Mhm.
And then the next day, I was on a conference call with two of our VPs discussing our toll mill pricing and negotiations at another facility. So, it's and everywhere in between is what I'm doing day to day.
Mhm.
And I get up every morning. I don't want to not get up in the mornings. Every morning I'm get up. I'm happy to go to work and have things that I enjoy to do and like doing.
Yeah, I think you hit on probably one of the most common things that we hear, and it's kind of funny because every day is different, and what that means in our world is that there's kind of a finite number of things that in theory, there's a finite number of things that could end up happening in that day, but my day today isn't going to look exactly like my day did yesterday. It's not that, I've never had to deal with this logistic issue before and now I do. It's not always like that, which is something I've learned when we talk to students or to people coming in, can almost be something that they get a little scared of. Like, boy, that sounds like, a lot of stress by having to learn to do something new every day. Kind of, it's like, it's not necessarily like that. It's just you don't know what the problem is going to be. I also often think about it from the terms of, as just part of a visualization. I often think of people that work around folks that are in feed mill management, so that aren't always in operations, but that are, sometimes in meetings and sometimes out. And wherever they go at the end of the day, maybe it's to go pick up kids from preschool, or maybe it's to, go wherever. They must always look at all of them, and to some extent, I'll throw myself in there too, because I get to do a little of this at the university, and go, what is it you do? Because some days you walk in here to pick up your kid and you're dressed in, like, nice business wear because you had a meeting with the VP. Other days you walk in and it is grease and dirt and all other kind of stuff. It's like, no, nobody has a job that you do both of those things. That job doesn't exist. And it's like, let me tell you something. Yes, it does.
Exactly. And like I said, that's the enjoyable part to me. Is there's something different all the time. And it's hard to describe. I have two daughters that are in high school. The younger one just asked me again the other day. People ask me what you do for work. I don't know what to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I feed chickens.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that goes along with that, from the gamut. Buying feed ingredients all the way to fixing a piece of machinery that's broken, and everywhere in between is what I'm doing.
One of the ways that I like to describe it, and I went through the same bachelor's degree as you did there at K State, going through the feed science program. And one of the things that I always tell people is, not an engineer, but did a little engineering, and not an animal nutritionist, but certainly took some classes in there. Not a biologist, not a chemist, but boy, definitely had to learn those things, and took classes on how electrical motors work and all this. And so you got to be, it was something that I think anybody that kind of has an interest in a jack of all trades type of role, that you can also be successful and get promoted and move up a chain. It's a really interesting career path for that, because you can kind of scratch a lot of different itches of different interests you might have, and at one point get to go be a manager and do managerial things, and then on another day go turn a wrench. And there's not that many jobs like that, and this one's one that you can do that.
Exactly. You kind of reminded me of a story there about 3 or 4 years ago. We were starting up a new control system, new mill, and was going through the electrical stuff with the electrical contractor on site, looking over, and they had some questions and some confusion about going through the flow sheet and seeing how it was going to work electrical wise. And I kind of explained it to him. And after we've been sitting there talking about things for like 20 minutes, he just turned to me and asked, "Are you an electrical engineer?" Said, "No, I'm not an electrical engineer. I've just been doing this 20 years. I know how the electrical side of the feed mills work, and I can explain it to you, you know?"
Yep. I've been asked, are you are you an engineer? And I've been asked, are you a nutritionist? They like throw out that one, and I back off real quick, and I say, no, I'm not. Don't call me that. Um, there's a whole bunch of other people I've had on this podcast that won't find that joke funny. And the other day I actually got accused by somebody of, or do you have a background in accounting? And it's like, no, I don't, but had to learn to look at numbers a long time ago in order to try to do some of the things that you have to do. And so you get to learn a lot of different skills, which like we keep saying is always interesting. um Again, my guest today is Joshua Rengstorf. Joshua is in feed mill management with Opal Foods across a number of different states and a number of different facilities. So that kind of covers, to some extent, kind of we've gone over more or less the same thing of what's interesting about the job, which we like. I don't want to drag everybody down, but beyond the regulations, what's the other part? And if you've got a good way, and I'll take notes because this is something we want to always help with the students to give a good spin to the bad parts of it. What are the parts that are kind of the difficult part, in order to be as transparent as we possibly can about what this job is really like?
I mean, you have to be the right type of person, I think. You have to learn I had to learn skills over the years of how to interact with different type of people just from the variation of my job. I've got to work on a day-to-day basis with these truck drivers I got delivering feed who might or might not have graduated high school and are,
Hmm.
country guys through and through, and got to communicate with them and get them to perform what you need them to do on a day-to-day basis. And like I said the other day, then I got to sit down in a meeting with our board of directors and explain something to them about the feed mills. And it's almost like I'm a different person. I
Hmm.
have to be
Hmm.
for those different roles. So I mean, that's a hard thing, and not a lot of people I think can do that. It's got to be the right type of person who can interact with and can motivate and work with a whole subsection of your company, not
Hmm.
just not just a couple peers. That's a
Yeah.
really hard thing I think for a lot of people to be able to do.
Yeah. What has your experience been like? And certainly the most relevant is whatever's happened the most recent been with the personnel side of things, as far as recruiting, retaining, training folks. What does that look like in from your perspective over the last 5 years or so?
I've actually been pretty lucky with our mills. For the layer company I work for now, we've got a pretty stable workforce. I mean, we've worked in some new folks, but the smaller workforces and distance ones, just certain areas, it's been kind of rough. I know, like up in Iowa, it's been a little tough keeping drivers. There's just so many
Hmm.
driving jobs out there, keeping those guys on hand. We've run through a few, but for the most part, it's been pretty good. But trying to, throughout my career, I've had a lot of struggles in the past because we're not the highest paying industry, agriculture generally. We can't compete with a lot of the businesses out there. So we've got to, offer some other things. We've got to, got to treat your employees well. You got to make them feel at home, make them feel like they're family if you want to keep them.
Hmm.
We do cookouts all the time. We are interacting with people, finding out how things are going for them, not just here, but at home. Just you've got to develop relationships with employees to try and keep them. And I've found it's a little harder, not necessarily here at the mill that I'm at most days, but the ones I get to visit once a month. That can be a struggle sometimes to kind of
Sure.
develop those personal relationships as much as you need to.
How about on the usually I think the things that we hear the most are things related to personnel, and some of it is not unique to our industry, but something we see a lot as far as some of that recruiting, retaining, and it's dirty job. Sometimes it's hot, it's cold. All of those things are all other industries folk deal with some of the same stuff, but it's something we hear about a lot. I think one of the other major things that comes up a lot when we talk to folks, and it goes back to that personnel side, but it also impacts the management, the folks that are in the management, is you're in an industry where there is a customer, and that customer is an animal, and that animal always has to eat. So the idea of you know, 8 to 5 is not remotely what our industry is about, and it can be hard to make anybody's individual job about that. So what's your experience been, as far as the way to manage kind of the 24/7 nature of feeding animals?
Yeah, that's a lot harder. Actually, that's one of the better things about moving over to the layer side is most of our mills don't run 24/7.
Hmm.
It's not like the broiler side. On the broiler side, trying to staff and man those night shifts when you're running mills 24 hours a day and over the weekends, it's tough. You got to find the right type of people who are willing to fill those shifts, and usually it's not long term. It's a lot of turnover. You got to focus a lot more on your training programs and getting people who know what they're doing in the evenings. It's otherwise you're woken up with phone calls all night long and all weekend. But on the layer side, we're a little more constrained. Uh, the main mill I work at here, we run about 12 hours a day, but
Okay.
pretty much 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So it's on that side of it. I mean, I'm still crazy busy during the day, but there comes a point in time in the evenings and weekends that I can plan things and do have time
Yeah.
off. That's why I am enjoying the layer side a lot more than the broiler side just because of that. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but and I think that's why we probably have a little bit less employee turnover too. Is I can offer guys jobs Monday through Friday, during the day. Yeah, don't have to try and find people to work nights and weekends. That's very hard, extremely hard, especially in the labor environment we're in.
Yeah, that's very true. I think the only caveat to that I've ever heard anybody kind of, or counterpoint to it a little bit, and I think it's a very small counterpoint, is the only thing is that on the operations that are used to running nights, weekends, whatever, when there is something like a breakdown and we have to get it fixed, and then we get back up and running at 8 p.m. or whatever it is, there's somebody coming into work at 8 p.m. and that's good. As where in the situation where we're running something Monday through Friday, 8 10 hour 12-hour days, if we have a breakdown, well, the animals are still going to need to eat, and the fact that we couldn't make feed during this time, we're going to have to make it sometime. So who wants overtime? Who can work tonight? Who can work on the weekend? Because there's not another shift coming.
It happens, and guys just got to fill in. Like you said, it can be an issue, but there's still, I mean, it can happen. But these layer mills are generally mash as well. It's things are a little simpler. I mean, there's times you do have breakdowns, yes, but they're usually not quite to the same extent as
Right.
broiler side. The pelleting side is, in my experience anyway, the pelleting side is where a lot of your problems come in. Pelleting cooling, especially if you've got horizontal coolers, that those tend to when they break down, that's not like a hour or two fix generally.
Rip themselves apart. Wire all the pans and the chains all in one pile at one end. Yeah.
It's happened before. I've had remember a phone call about 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, right when the mill was getting ready to shut down for our small 24-hour shutdown or so, and one of our coolers completely ripped itself apart, the top deck laying on the bottom.
Yeah.
And so lineup maintenance guys, and we started at 5 a.m. Sunday morning, and I think it was like 1 or 2 in the morning Monday morning before we got it back running. It happens.
It does. It happens, and a lot of what you said, it involves, and most of the folks that I think that we talk to that are in any kind of a mill management role, and certainly the prime manager at the facility, or someone in a role like yours that is over multiple facilities, you don't find too many folks in that position that are going to be particularly high strung, right? I mean, you got, if you can't roll with the punches, it ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna be the job for you.
Definitely not. I mean, I've had a lot of people over the years ask me why I don't get excited about things. We have a problem, we're going to get it fixed. Getting excited about it does not help the situation. You
That's it.
know,
That's
even
it.
when there's, even when an employee has a problem, yelling at employees, yelling about things, getting excited, that doesn't work. You're
Right.
damaging relationships.
Yeah.
We talk about things, we talk about the problem, talk about how to get it fixed. And employees who care about it don't need you to yell at them to fix that problem.
Yeah.
You don't need to get excited about problems. We just need to fix them.
That's great advice. I think we're going to end that part of our conversation right there. I think that's great. We should print that out somewhere.
It's time for our famous three.
So we always like to finish the podcast up with some kind of professional development kind of things. The first is a question related to, if someone were to approach you and say, "Hey, I'd like to learn more about feed milling. What would be a good resource for me to look at? What would you tell them between online newsletters, websites, periodicals, books, whatever? What would be your thought of, hey, if you want to learn more about this, here's a good place to go that is reputable and is going to give you like real information, not just something that you Googled and cross your fingers that you hope it's accurate."
Well, if you're talking about industry news, I mean, generally, Watt, I've subscribed to pretty much all their newsletters that relate to feed or poultry, just because anything noteworthy is going to be in there,
Hmm.
something to look at. I mean, if you're really interested in getting in the business at some point, there's a lot of classes out there from Kansas State or other locations. I'm sure you guys have them in North Carolina as well. You know, my supervisors I have at all my facilities who didn't have a background education in feed, I've put all of them through like the KSU 500 courses to kind of just get a broad overview and kind of learn some things that they might, instead of waiting for the experience to happen at the mill, maybe learn something ahead of time. But those are sources I would talk about.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things that we've learned a lot, related to what you just said there at the end, is that, and going back to some of the things related to personnel, is if we can find folks that have somehow, however they manage to matriculate into our industry and then decide, well, I mean, I just came here looking for a job, but you know what? I think this might be the place for me. Having ways to train them and have them give, this is where you can go get information. This is where you can go get training, has become really, really valuable in my opinion, because most of them aren't going to have gone through a degree program or have spent a lot of time at the feed mill growing up or worked at one, as a high school job. Like that's not the reality anymore. So when we find ones that are interested, how can we how what can we give them to keep them to stoke that interest, I guess.
Definitely, because you're not going to find, people with our education background everywhere. It's, my supervisors at these mills, they've either grown up working in mills for years or came from, my supervisor here at the main mill is came over from a maintenance background
Hmm.
in different industry. He worked at maintenance rendering plants, things like that. So
Hmm.
brought him over here, and I kind of had to teach him and use the KSU 500 and other resources and use my experience to teach him about the feed side. Same thing with my supervisor out west. She's in the grain industry, worked for a grain elevator and stuff, but not anything to do with feed. And same thing, it's kind of had to work her into the industry and teach her,
Yep.
when to call with questions, what things to look for.
Find the good people and then train them is probably something that's just as, or can be just as successful as waiting until you find the person who's already been trained. It's like, nah, if you're good and you're willing to learn, we can train you on this. Yeah.
Yeah, anyone can learn. It's like you said, it's a willingness and a want to,
Yeah, I agree. The next question in there would be, anything that's not necessarily related to feed milling that you've found particularly useful in your professional career. And we've had people talk about specific books they read or organizations they've belonged to, even some things that have crossed over from personal into professional, of I'm part of this group and that's taught me leadership that became really valuable in my job, that I didn't expect to happen. Anything like that come to mind?
Well, I did, after K State, while I was in the industry, I did go ahead and get my master's in business, which
Hmm.
I think has helped me a lot just on the other side of things, not the middle side, but on sitting down, looking through cost reports, analyzing, acquisitions, things like that. Just it's helped me a lot progress, just knowing that side of it as well, the business side,
Hmm.
because that's what we're ultimately here for is keep the business profitable and keep money coming in to pay our salaries. That's
Yeah.
the ultimate goal, which sometimes it can be tough in the poultry industry.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I think that goes along with that kind of never stop learning mentality, right? If there's something else that can be beneficial that you're interested in, go find a way to learn about it. Yep. And then to kind of finish us off, the folks that you've worked with, worked for, learned from, or that work for you now, any kind of combination of those. If you had to pick out a trait or two that you said, okay, the ones that I've worked with for or that work for me that are the most successful, this is the thing that they do, or this is the character trait that they have that has really made them successful in this role and is something that I would advise others try to incorporate this into the way that you operate because it will pay dividends.
I would say goes back to, we talked about a little bit the personality of just being steady, not excitable. You need people who, aren't going to go crazy because something broke in the mill. You got to
Hmm.
have that part of it. People with a mechanical background help a bunch too.
Hmm.
It all, we talk about all these other things, biosecurity, safety, whatever. Everything comes back to, at the end of the day, getting that feed out the door, keeping things running. If you got people working for you who are out in the mill and understand that stuff and see problems before they happen and can take care of them, it just makes day to day running of the mill so much smoother.
Yeah.
People who've got that mechanical knowledge in their head doesn't have to be necessarily related to feed mills, but they fit in this industry really well, I think.
So someone who's people being willing to, take a breath, not like you said, get overly excited, and then the having it in their mind some amount of, and it can be mechanical ability, it can be critical thinking, problem solving, that okay, we've got this problem, we got to get to this solution, how do we get there? And then not being afraid in some cases, I think, to hey, this is already broken, let's try to fix it, right? Well, have you ever fixed one of these before? Well, no, but it's already broken, so let's see what we can do. And I'm not gonna fly off the handle and go nuts and go call and oh, we're the sky is falling. No, let's see what we can do ourselves.
That happens sometimes too. Even people who, are fairly level headed. I've had maintenance supervisors in the past who were the one of the best ones I've ever worked with. He's still in the industry too. He could fix anything, but whenever he told you something was broken and he gave me a time frame of what it would take to fix it, I always mentally cut it in about half because he
Yeah,
always, would overestimate. Always, it's going to be worse than he thinks it is. If he told me to take 12 hours to fix something, I'd think 6 or 8.
yeah,
Generally, he'd always give me the worst case scenario. It seems
yeah.
like,
Yeah,
but
that's
that was
probably
just his
wise.
personality.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Joshua, I've really enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to just kind of share this industry with people.
Yeah, you bet. Again, my guest today has been Joshua Rengstorf. Joshua's in feed mill management with Opal Foods across a number of different facilities in a number of different states in the United States. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
Once again, on behalf of Wise Genetics, I'm Adam Farnolls from North Carolina State University. Thanks for listening or watching the Feed Science Podcast. We'll talk to you next time.